Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Today we conclude our Super Goal 4 with our last two goals, 4.5 and 4.6, solving quadratic equations, ultimately what you use factoring for, and the word problems that go with it. I know you're excited about that, so we're going to jump right into it here. To solve a quadratic equation, or any equation with a power, by factoring, which is what we're learning here, solving it by factoring, the equation must be in factor form and equal to 0. So it's possible to have a monomial coefficient out here, and then parentheses, parentheses, maybe more parentheses, and then equal to 0. Notice that there are no plus or minus signs between the parentheses. So it's all factors on the left equal to 0, okay? If you have parentheses, and we'll get to this in a minute, but if you have parentheses and it's not equal to 0, then you have to get rid of the parentheses, kind of combine your like terms, and then refactor it. Okay, and you'll see that kind of example in just a minute. Okay, so these first few examples, the first 3 to be exact, are in the correct form. You'll notice that I have 2 sets of parentheses multiplied together equal to 0. Here I have a coefficient, or a monomial factor, and then a parentheses equal to 0. Here I have a factor out in front, parentheses, parentheses equal to 0. So these first 3 are in the correct form. Okay? So I'm going to take some time to explain those first and how we do this, and then I'm going to kind of give you a shortcut. Okay? That I would hope that you will all use. Okay? Alright, so this starts out by saying this times this. 2 factors multiplied together equal 0. So if 2 things are being multiplied together and my answer is 0, what has to be true about one of those things? Yes?
It has to be 0.
It has to be 0. You can't multiply 2 things together, your answer be 0, and one of them not be 0. So either the x minus 5 is 0, or the x plus 9 is 0. So one of those things has to be 0. So I set the factors equal to 0, and then I solve them. So I'm going to add 5, and on the other one I'll subtract 9. So I have 5 or negative 9. I don't need to do that. As my 2 answers. Yes?
Is John alone?
He is not here today. So just let me show you how this works. If 5 were the value of x, 5 minus 5 would be 0. 5 plus 9 would be 14. 0 times 14 would be 0. If the value of x were negative 9, negative 9 minus 5 is negative 14. Negative 9 plus 9 is 0, and negative 14 times 0 is 0. So I'm getting 2 solutions there. Okay? The next one. 2 factors being multiplied together with 0 as my answer. So that means either the negative 7x is 0, or the 3x plus 1 is 0. One of the 2 factors has to be 0 to get 0 as an answer. And then you solve them. So on this one, divide by negative 7, and x is 0. And on the other one, subtract 1. So 3x is negative 1, and then divide by 3, and I get negative 1/3. So 0 or negative 1/3. And then on the third one, that's set up in the right form. Here I have 3 variable factors, which means I'm going to have 3 possible solutions. So either the x is 0, or the 2x plus 5 is 0, or the 7x minus 2 is 0. So this time, 3 solutions. So the 3 variable factors Any one of them could be 0. So the first one is solved for us. So a possible solution is 0 for x. For the second one, I'm going to subtract the 5 and then divide by 2. So negative 5 over 2. And then the third one, I'm going to add 2 and divide by 7. So I get 3 solutions. Okay, questions so far? Solving by factoring is the first way we're learning how to solve a quadratic equation. We'll learn other ways yet this year, okay? Is just a part of a question eventually. Like right now, it's the whole question. So I'm going to show you a shortcut, and I'm going to do these shortcuts because you're smart enough to do them, and it's going to save you some time, okay? So here it is. If there is a variable factor outside of the parentheses, notice I'm saying variable factor, so it's got to have a variable with it. So negative 7x, or just x, or 1/2 x, or 2/3 x, or negative 8x. If there is a variable factor out here in front of the parentheses, that's always going to give you a 0. No matter what it looks like, positive, negative, with or without a coefficient, okay? And then on the parentheses part, you change the sign, okay? So I'm going to go negative, and then to the right, 5 over understood 1 in front of the x. So positive 5 over 1. So that's my answer. Change the sign. Negative 9 over 1. Negative 9. Negative 1 over 3. So negative 1/3. Negative 5 over 2. Positive 2 over 7. So without having to write any of this stuff, I'm going to go right to the solutions without writing any of the setups or the work for those. Okay? Does that make sense what I'm doing there? Why am I changing the sign? That's rhetorical. I'm going to answer that myself. I'm changing the sign when I do the shortcut, so negative 5 over 2, to compensate for the subtraction that I would do if I were solving it outright solving. Okay? And then this number over this number, because you're dividing by the variable or the coefficient of the x term. Okay? So I'm going to use that shortcut from here on out. Okay? Now again, those 3 were set up for you. They were factored and they were equal to 0. If it's not factored and not equal to 0, you have to make it that way. So like this next example. We're equal to 0, but it's not factored. So you're going to factor it. Go through your rules of factoring. Is there a common factor? No. I have 3 terms, so I'm going to trial and error. First term is x squared, so x times x. Minus last term means 1 of each sign. And then 8's going to be 4 times 2 or 8 times 1. 4 times 2 works. If I check to make sure I'm getting my negative 2, outer times outer is negative 4. Inner times inner is positive 2. There's my negative 2. And then I'm going to get 2 solutions. X is either negative 2 over 1, so change the sign, negative 2 over 1, or positive 4 over 1. So negative 2 or positive 4 are my 2 solutions. So do we see how I use the shortcut and didn't write the solving steps? You're going to want to do that, trust me. When you get to the word problems here and there's a lot of work to begin with, you don't want to have to show all that solving. Okay? Okay, next question. Not factored and not equal to 0. So the first thing is get it equal to 0. So subtract that 10. So I have 6x squared plus 11x minus 10 equals 0. No common factor. So I go to my trial and error. You'll notice on solving that the factoring is usually a little simpler. You won't see a single cube on this ever, okay? So I'm sure you're excited about that one. I'm going to go with 3 and 2. I don't know. 15, 2. I got it. Opposite signs. I know the plus is going to go there and the minus there. And then 10 is 5 times 2. The more you do of these, you can visualize stuff even before you write numbers down. That's where I knew where the signs went. So outer times outer is 15. Inner's minus 4. 15 minus 4 is 11. So my two solutions are positive 2 over 3 and negative 5 over 2. So positive 2/3, negative 5/2 are the two solutions. Next one. Not equal to 0, so subtract your 80 to get it that way first. So 5x squared minus 80 equals 0. Is there a common factor? Yes, I can take out a 5. I have two terms. They're not going to be cubes. They're not going to be cubes. They are squares. So x squared is x times x. 16, 4 times 4, plus and a minus. And you got to be careful here because sometimes this question is missed because you give me more answers than you should have. I should only have 2 answers. Variable factors. So this 5 doesn't have a variable with it, so it has no effect on my answers. It doesn't count for anything. It means nothing. So from the first parentheses, I get negative 4 over understood 1, so negative 4. And from the other one, positive 4 over 1, or positive 4. So here's a good time to tell you that the degree of the polynomial means what is the largest power. In that question, the largest power is 2, which means that there are going to be 2 solutions. So the power, the largest power, is called the degree of the polynomial, and it will tell you how many answers you should have. So in this case, 2. So do not want 0 then. Can't have 0. I'm going to only have 2 solutions, okay? So again, only if you have a variable factor. 5 is not a variable factor, it's just a coefficient there, okay? Does that make sense?